Everyone. Hi everyone. I'm Nicholas Tamayo. I'm the urban forester and workforce development program manager. I'm really excited to be meeting with you all. We're going to be talking about trees. We're going to be talking about why we're planting trees, how to plant trees, and where we're planting trees. And what's exciting is we have just kicked off our program. In the last couple of days, we hired on 13 folks to learn how to plant trees and be part of our program, be part of the first cohort of urban foresters in South Stockton who are going to be learning how to plant trees and hopefully move into the profession of land conservation after the fact. So we're going to get started. Please feel free to stop me with any questions or if you have any ideas that come up. We're not going to get too technical about anything, and some of the things might even be familiar from the previous conversation that you had with Wayne and Matt. But we'll get started. Oh, and Brianna Garcia, who is the community outreach specialist for our program, is going to be co-facilitating with me. So our program is called Greenlining the Hood, and we are greening up the neighborhood one tree at a time. So some of the things that we're going to talk about, we're going to check in. We're going to go over the what and whys of urban greening, de-investment in South Stockton. We're going to go over our grant, so the Transformative Climate Communities grant that gives us the funding to plant all of these trees in South Stockton. And we're going to talk about our city's soil and how we can regenerate it. So a little bit of history. I love maps, so we're going to look at some cool maps. And we're going to talk about some of the trees that we're planting over the next year and a half. So I found this cool Twitter post from George Takei. He's got great content on Twitter, and he shared a video from Australia where the city of Melbourne, I believe, they gave every tree in the city an email address. And it was really supposed to be used as an opportunity for people to let the city know if a tree was looking sick or if it had been, damaged, and they would respond to that. But what people really did was like email the tree and say, thank you for providing me shade today, or, thank you for being outside my window because I was having a tough time and I really needed to see some beauty. So when you check in, please share your name, your pronouns, and what message you would send to a tree if you could. And I'll go first. My name is Nicholas Tamayo. My pronouns are he, him, his. And today I just planted 8 trees. And I would say thank you to the trees for working me out and for bringing myself and the 11 new foresters together as a crew. I just can't explain how excited I am after today. So yeah, I'll pass it to Bianette.
Hello everyone, Bianette, she, her, ella. A message I would send to a tree is thank you for providing shade on, sorry. Yeah, that would be my message. That's a really cool. I'll pass it to Brianna.
I think you're muted. I don't think we can hear you, Bree.
It says she's unmuted, but we can't hear.
I know she's talking. I could hear her in the office, so I'm not sure what's going on. How about Irene?
Irene, she, her, hers. And then the message I would share to Tree is thank you for showing the importance of like roots, which is like our history and where we come from. I'll pass it. The person I can see on my screen is Rain, so I'll pass it to Rain.
Thank you, Irene. And hi, everyone. My name is Rain Romeo, and pronouns are she, hers. And I was also going to say shade, so I'm going to say something else that comes to mind. Another message that I would give to trees is to say thank you for supporting our wildlife. For example, like for birds, for them to create their nest, for their little birdlings as well. So providing shelter. And then I pass it off to Nick.
My name's Nick. No offense, I don't really do the pronoun things because my name's Nick, so I'm not trying to be rude to anybody else. What message would you send? I'd say thank you for the oxygen that we get to breathe, producing the oxygen that we get to breathe so that we can have healthy air. And I don't know who's, let's see if you, how many people, yeah, I don't know who's not, let's give it to Anthony.
Thank you, Nick. Anthony Robinson Jr. Message I would give to a tree. And I would thank the ancestors. I really would ask the tree what DNA messages it is, or insight it has to pass forward. Yeah, and I would just thank the tree for enduring. I would pass it to Pat.
Looks like Pat. How about William?
Hi everyone, William Lutzenberg, Program Manager at Public Health Advocates. And so I am running the Climate Leaders Program, and my pronouns are he and him. And a message that I would send to a tree if I could is just thank you for your beauty. I guess I will pass it off to James.
Hello, my name is James Bond, he, him. What I would send to a tree would be, thank you for clean air and making our communities pretty. And to pass it on, Zian.
Hi, my name is Zian. I go by she, her. And something that I would say to a tree is thank you for your leaves because they're pretty when the seasons change. And I'd like to pass it on to Chowan.
Hi everyone, my name's Choanne. My pronouns are she, her. The interesting thing about this check-in question is that it actually kind of reminds me of a memory of like when I visited Sac State. And if you guys don't know, Sac State really prides themselves on like the amount of trees that they put on their campus. And when you go onto their campus, the air is so clean and it makes you feel so good. Like you can just feel the difference. So I think my answer is going to be similar to what some people have already said. It's just like, thank you so much for doing your best to provide us clean air and just creating an atmosphere that just makes us feel very good and very healthy. And I think I'll pass it to Anait.
Hey, thank you. And so my name is Anait Corona, and my pronouns are she and her. And so when I was little, there was like a small tree in my backyard. And so I was small and the tree was small, so I thought it was like cute. So I made it my friend and I would like put a scarf around it. So if I could tell a tree or give it a message, I would say thank you for being our friends and like being, you know, carrying the weight of humanity on its shoulders, really, because they're crucial to us. So I just say thank you for their friendship. And so I'll popcorn it to Sophia.
Hi, my name's Sophia. I have she, her pronouns. And I would tell a tree, thank you for your life lessons. Because they have like some metaphors to them, like their roots are all connected. And then different trees, some trees stay green all year round, some shed their leaves, some make flowers, some don't. Yeah. uh, I'll pass it to Carice.
Well, Jonathan, I think if Carice doesn't want to go or isn't there, Jonathan, why don't you wrap up the check-in?
Sure. Thank you. Jonathan Pruitt, he, him, his. Well, for sure, thank you, but also sorry. I think being able to really see to it that, you know, sometimes people don't see the investment trees have where, you know, we put in a tree, we need to put love and cherish into it. And if we don't, then it doesn't help us, you know. And so I think, you know, I treat it the same way as people where it's, you know, they talk because they talk to each other and because they work the same way. It's really important that we also apologize for, you know, what we've done, the neglect that we've given to them.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all. I think that we all have a lot of thanks to give to trees. And out of that, it sounds like we all have a good understanding of what trees give to us. And that's really that connection to land. And so urban greening is the public landscaping and urban forestry projects that create a mutually beneficial relationship between us and our environment. So in what some people call concrete jungles, or, you know, just inner cities that are intentionally ungreen, this becomes more and more important in finding those little pockets of beauty, those little pockets of clean air and shade, especially in the Central Valley, where we have increasingly hot summers, increasingly worse air quality days. Trees are so important to our well-being. And so that's what we do. We're planting trees in the spots that need it the most. And so, oops, trying to move this out of the way. So yeah, we plant trees because we want to tackle these issues of urban heat island effects, air quality, pollution, lack of shade, and lack of color and beauty. Something that I'm really pushing as the urban forester is this intentional beautification of South Stockton. And something that I talked to the crew about is that in the neighborhood that I grew up in Sacramento, which is Land Park, it's one of the most beautiful neighborhoods I've ever seen. It is a upper middle class neighborhood. It's predominantly white, and it is filled with beauty. The people that planted those streets intended to make it beautiful. And if we aren't doing the same, we're saying that people of a certain income or socioeconomic level have to bear the burden of survival and don't get to experience beauty. So when we plant in South Stockton, when we plant gardens or trees, we have to be thinking about everything, you know, from beauty to, you know, sustainability, to feeding folks, to feeding the environment and the wildlife and rebuilding habitats. So I can't stress enough how important urban greening is in our city. Any questions so far? I can't see the chat, so if someone has questions in the chat, just maybe Brianna, stop me and let me know.
For sure, Nico. I'm monitoring the chat. No questions, so feel free to move on.
Okay. So we could start at any point in the city's history to talk about where we're at today, but we're going to start with redlining. So this is probably familiar to a lot of you, but redlining was a racist practice that essentially kept loans and funding sources from investing in certain parts of the city. And this happened all over the country. And what it led to was lower tax brackets in South Stockton, lower property values, which led to, you know, poorer school districts and, you know, a more unprepared workforce. People got priced out. And in North Stockton, investment was heavy. You know, around UOP, people were able to buy land, build their homes, build businesses. And in our environment, the disparity
I think you might have frozen.
Okay.
Oh, I thought that was me. I guess it's Brianna and Nicholas because they're in the same spot.
Yes, let me let them know.
I guess as we let it go, I mean, Anthony has a question in the chat. He says, how many of the urban greening crew live in South Stockton or are from South Stockton? Do we know?
I think Nico would know. Yeah.
Ask the question again.
Oh, how many of the urban greening crew that had just started last week, how many of them live in South Stockton or are from South Stockton? I interviewed a few and they were from South Stockton. I met like 2 ladies that were at the tree planting. One of them was from the Conway Homes neighborhood, and I'm not sure the other one is familiar with South Stockton, but I'm not sure if it's everyone.
Hey, everybody. So sorry about that. Our internet cut out.
Yay.
Are you on your phone's Wi-Fi?
No, we're on the offices or the center's Wi-Fi.
That's okay. You just have to backtrack his conversation.
Yeah. So so Nico's trying to get on right now, but does anybody first have like any questions about what we were saying, or has anybody ever heard of the term urban greening before? Can we get some hands?
Okay, wait. Open you up.
Okay, I see one. Oh, I see Nico is back on.
Sorry about that. I don't know what happened.
Pat does have her hand up, so I don't know if you
No,
want.
she wanted to see hands.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll try to pick up where I left off. So all of these things kind of contribute to the issues that we face today, which is the urban heat island effect. The infrastructure in South Stockton is such that it's not even plantable in a lot of places. There's no planting strips. That's sort of that element of environmental racism that comes through lack of consideration or like strategically pouring concrete in spaces that could accommodate trees. And we'll talk more about that, but this is the reality of South Stockton. And so when that's why we're planting in South Stockton. That's why transformative climate communities gave us the 5 square miles in South Stockton. So in 1930, HOLC, which is I'm kind of blanking out on the acronym. If somebody knows the acronym, please put it in the chat. But basically,
HOLC, sorry.
Do you know what that stands for, Irene?
Homeowners Loan Corporation.
That's right, yeah. So they created these maps of the city that informed how the city could be developed from 1st grade to 4th grade, and then the red spots that were deemed undesirable for investment or funding, is where the term redlining comes from. And it's interesting to look at this map and kind of compare it to some of the environmental screening maps that we have today that we rely on to see where which areas of our city need the most reinvestment. So like I said, oh gee. That's horrible. Okay, there we go. Solid waste sites in Stockton. So all of the nine, where solid waste is held in Stockton is primarily in these redlined communities. There's absolutely zero spots in North Stockton. Diesel particulate matters are higher in South Stockton. And there's clear disparities in the city. So this is a shot of California Street, which I thought was really interesting because this is on the east side of historic Little Manila. It's the neighborhood that needs a lot of trees, but doesn't have the infrastructure to support it. It's all concrete. It doesn't have sidewalks that are wide enough to accommodate a planting strip, and there's power lines. And we could assume that there's also probably water lines running along these sidewalks. But right across the street is a newer development that was, intentionally planned out with big planting strips and sidewalks that could accommodate big trees. So we have to ask ourselves, why is this not the norm in our cities? And what can we do as an urban forestry program or as residents of the city to push for that kind of equity in the development of South Stockton? Has anybody ever noticed this spot in downtown and kind of seen like how crazy this looks? Like, to me, this is shocking because I want to plant trees over here so badly, but it's almost impossible. Has anybody ever seen this before?
I don't even know. I've never even been on the city, but I mean, it's difference between night and day.
Yeah. I mean, this was a red line neighborhood that, wasn't thought about as a space that should have beauty or should have shade. And, this is, another generation, decades later, and we're thinking about how do we bring people to Stockton, and it looks like that. And it's just really, it's interesting to think about, how do we tackle this issue with developers who are able to buy these parcels of land and develop them. And we kind of have to figure out more strategically how to get our trees in the ground. So our program really depends on the community. And as we go along, we find these spots that are perfect for trees, that have the right kind of planting strips, that have the big lawns. They're out there in South Stockton. But the things that we come up against are, the tree trauma that many residents have, whether that's, a lack of faith that once the tree gets planted, it'll be maintained properly, that the trees will just die, that they'll get into the pipes and burst pipes, and then the homeowners or renters will have to be responsible for that, that trees fall down, that they drop their limbs and crush cars. All of these things are, really valid points that people are concerned about when it comes to trees, that people want to see trees in their communities, but they don't necessarily want to be the ones to have them on their property. And so we really have to build trust, not just as a program, but as a group that's planting these trees, to show that we have the capacity to do it right, to take care of them, and to make sure that we're helping raise the capacity of the homeowners. Like, we can do all of the workshops in the world, but if we're not coming out regularly to make sure the trees are watered, that the stakes haven't been broken off or stolen, or that, the tree hasn't been vandalized or just completely died because of like a disease or pests, these things happen and we have to be on top of it. So Brianna is really the person that is spearheading the effort to raise the community trust in us. And well, we're doing that through all of our programs. So we have a workforce development component where we're training residents, re-entry residents and system impacted residents to learn how to plant trees. It's a 10-week program, and we go out and we do community tree plantings with the community at these big parks that need a lot of trees in them. And then we do adopted tree programs. So sort of taking from the model of a city like Sacramento that has this whole program with PG&E where if someone wants a tree, SacTree will go out with a forester and do a site evaluation and make sure there's no pipes underground. And then they'll plant a free tree for them and maintain it for them. And there's nothing like that in Stockton until now. So we're really proud of it. But we still have to build that trust because people are really hesitant to take our trees, and we want to give them out, but not everybody wants them. So I'm actually kind of curious if any of you have thought about trees and thought maybe it was a good idea, but decided against it for any of the reasons that we talked about.
I see a hand. Go ahead, Pat.
So my problem is I'm on the south side, we got big lots. We have trees in our backyard, like along the backyard fence, right? And I don't have any, but my neighbor has two big, 60, 70-foot trees. They're not pines or anything. They're just some nasty little tree that the leaves come off every fall. And they don't go in his backyard. They blow because the wind comes from the east, from the west, right? Going east. They blow in my yard. And I'm the one that's picking them up. I had a pool back there. I had a 16-foot doughboy. I got tired of cleaning the leaves, even with the tarp. I was tired of leaves in my doughboy pool. And it gets hot in Stockton. It would be nice to have a pool, right? But then I keep wanting to ask him, can you top your trees so the leaves will drop in your yard, not in my yard? And this is one of the reasons. We have rats. We don't have squirrels. Okay? This is another reason. They nest. They nest in our trees. I've been here 13 years, and to this day, I've never, ever, ever seen a squirrel. But and at parks too, I'm talking about. But I have seen plenty of rats at sunset and stuff like that. That's the problem, is the trees. I don't mind having trees. I do my own trees. I have an olive tree. There's a pecan tree, stuff like that. Even with the rats, they eat the pecans. They eat the almonds. So
Yeah.
there's more to just why people don't want a tree.
Yeah,
Trees do bring
absolutely.
problems.
Yeah, Pat, you bring up some good points, and that's a real issue for urban foresting efforts, is that residents have these real concerns that there's not a lot to argue against. I mean, it's hard to argue against limbs dropping or pipes bursting or rats. Those are real. And so, how do we come together as a community and find the right way to do it? And for us as an organization, that we're trained and prepared to handle that and make sure that the right trees are going in. And there are trees that are evergreen that don't drop their leaves. And there are trees that are deciduous and do drop their leaves. And there's ways to work around it that we really believe is through education. And so that's why we really emphasize the community tree planting events and the workshop series that will begin in the summer. And that is why TCC has really come about. And this cohort program is the first one. So it's a pilot program. And we're really addressing all of these bald spots in the canopy of South Stockton. You could drive through a lot of these neighborhoods and not see a tree along the street for a long time. And some of that is that there's not the infrastructure like we talked about, but also all of these reasons why residents don't want trees. So there's a lot of work to do.
Nico, Pat, I see you have your hand up again. Go ahead.
So the other thing is, now also remember, you guys, because I work on this one too, a lot of people on the south side have asthma. So when you're planting trees, you got to also remember the pollens, like the pines. The pollens are horrible when they bloom and stuff. That's the other thing. I know there are trees that have deep roots, which is really great. But I mean, if we could plant pines or whatever all along the street and then just top them when they get 30 feet, you're doing better, because now you've got this umbrella, right? Instead of something that's going up and it's going to blow over and it's going to knock out your neighbor's yard. But that's the other thing you have to remember, is people down here are suffering and dealing with asthmas, COPDs, and pollens.
Yeah, that the pollen is tough too. And there are trees that you can plant that don't drop as much pollen, but again, like there's ways to approach the forestry that we'll talk about in a few slides that might, make it a little easier for folks to kind of step into forestry and support it, that maybe isn't right at your front door. So yeah, we'll get to the trees, but I did want to talk about our soil. So a big reason why we want to plant trees is to rebuild the soil that was once so fertile that it was, the most productive area in the country, and it still is to a large extent. But in the city itself, the dirt that exists in Stockton, we can really improve the life underneath our feet. So South Stockton was this floodplain. The Calaveras River flowed right through the middle of South Stockton, through Mormon Slough and into the San Joaquin, and it flooded. And we had this really rich, like silty, loamy soil that, you could grow anything in. And the Yokuts did grow. They farmed this area. But when we built that diverting channel in East Stockton, and Mormon Slough dried out, and we poured concrete over everything, the soil died. So when we plant trees, we want to rebuild that. And so some of the things that we can do is plant these native species and plant them in a way that builds the soil, the root networks, the mycorrhizal networks that are what is like microscopic fungi that, grow off of the carbon matter in the roots, and it forms a connection between the trees. Every tree kind of taps into that network and they communicate with one another. And when one tree is struggling with like pest or disease, the other trees in that network pick up the slack, and they might put out more acorns because that little tree is struggling. And we can approach urban forestry in that same way. And we want to do urban forestry in a way that sort of mimics the natural process of our rural forests in the mountains. Yeah, I mean, when we plant parks, we could think about the parks as little mini forests in the middle of our cities. This was a cool map. This is one of the maps that I wanted to look at, because this is from 1850, and it shows what that Mormon Slough looked like when it was still full. And you could just imagine that everything kind of around that was a floodplain. And obviously you can't build a city in a floodplain. So maybe Stockton shouldn't have been built here, but it was. And we have to find a way to get back to the fertility of this land in a future that, needs it, in the climate change future. The people that built this city were the manufacturing tycoons of the turn of the century. And they thought that the things that they were doing were going to be, the greatest gift to Earth. And what it really did was it dried out the Earth, and it made the Earth less healthy. So we have hundreds of years of degradation to sort of reverse with urban forestry. Any questions?
Oh, okay, so I have a question. Oh, go when you were back of this other slide. What was the last slide? Uh-huh.
This one?
Oh, yeah. I forgot what I was gonna say. I wanted to know if we were gonna break into discussion groups about this.
Oh, if we have time, I'm not sure we'll have time, but if you have like questions, feel free to put them in the chat so that people could tap into that.
I was getting ready to, but then you said any questions. Oh, when you start talking about the parks, oh, these guys play football in these parks, right? Or soccer. And I noticed we planted some last year at one point. They're missing. I think we did like Puentes, put in, I don't know, it was 20 or 30 of them. Granted, they were only about maybe a foot or 2 foot high. They're gone.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing we have to think about is putting them in to where people can't just go pull them out because it's in the way of their soccer ball, right?
Yeah, I mean,
or
people.
taking them home and putting them in their yards. Well,
Yeah, that happens, and every forestry project accounts for 10% of the trees not making it. And but yeah, a good maintenance plan that is always checking trees is the most important part of what we have to do. But the other thing that we have to do is we have to really, like we talked about in the previous slide, rebuild that soil. And the best way to do that is to focus on planting native trees. So I got a description, but has anybody ever really studied the native trees of this area? And if so, like, what was the most interesting thing that you learned about?
They were getting ready to do a overhaul at Van Busker Park, and they were talking about planting native trees. They had a list of them. I can't remember them, but I think pine was one of them, unfortunately. But I'm just joking. They had a list of them, and they were talking about how they do that. They join together and they build up the soils, and they were thinking about putting in native trees over there too.
Yeah, a lot of people plant native trees. We plant native trees. The most, the tree that we plant the most is the valley oak. So valley oaks are indigenous to the northern Central Valley. So Sacramento down to Modesto, they really thrive here. They prefer the hot summers and the cold winters. They establish very quickly. And if we plant enough of them together, they'll build that network under the soil. But the reason why for planting native trees or having native trees sort of be your like key species when you do urban forestry is that they are the most critical species to the survival of insects and wildlife. So the wildlife in Stockton depends on the valley oaks for shelter. They have these huge canopies that cover 30, 40 feet out in every direction, and root systems that match that underneath the ground. And so the squirrels and the birds and the insects, they all rely on that. And for millennia, people relied on the acorns of those valley oaks for food.
If you bring in these plants, are you going to bring in squirrels too?
Well, that we hope so. Squirrels are important to the ecosystem, and all of these animals are important to the ecosystem.
I think you need to bring them in, though. I don't think we have any that want to come down here.
Well, part of that is that they don't have any ways to move around the city safely. So having a really thick canopy of trees is like providing a highway over our streets. Because squirrels are tree dwellers, so they'll move through the trees and they'll come through neighborhoods that don't see wildlife if these trees are able to establish, and they're able to establish more successfully because they're climate resilient and they're adapted to the climate of our city. The issue though is that the climate of Stockton is probably going to look more like the climate of Barstow in 100 years. So should we plant valley oaks? Should we plant these blue oaks or interior live oaks? These trees that we know do well in these river soils and in the climate of Stockton today? Or should we plant trees that do well in deserts? You know, how do we balance that? Those are the questions that we think about on a daily basis when we're thinking about where to plant trees and what trees to plant. It's a tough one.
Nico, I just wanted to really quick uplift some comments in the chat.
Yeah.
So I learned more about the invasive plants in this area more than native trees, if that's similar. Chao Anu, can you like say more about that?
Yeah, I can. I don't remember like the exact details anymore, but this was back when me and my friend who was really into biology kind of went down a little spiral. But so many invasive plants are kind of planted around the area because a lot of people like the appearance, but some of them do a lot of harm. Like, for example, the tree of heaven, which is a very, very contradictory name that when you think about it, they completely obscure the place. They release I think they're also rated as pretty severe in the California database of invasive species, where they kind of release toxic, they change the soil chemistry too, so it kind of impacts a lot of the plants around it. And they also spread really quickly, like they can scatter like seeds, so like it's really hard to control too, and that really impacts kind of like just the amount of like manpower that you'll have to kind of invest to kind of just even control the spread too, when we can kind of invest in native plants instead. There's also other plants that I can think of off the top of my head. They aren't exactly trees, but they're also really popular and they're also really severe. Like for example, the Algerian ivy. The Algerian ivy, like basically the way it basically kills a lot of the plants around it by completely crawling around and covering all of the plants, obscuring it from sunlight to the point where like it's basically, imagine the plant version of like suffocating, choking a human, like those. So like a lot of these plants are really popular though, because a lot of people think they're pretty and they make the environment look really, really nice, right? They create a good garden question mark, but at the end of the day it does a lot more harm than good, and it not only affects like the soil chemistry of like the plants in the area, but also like it affects the animals too, and like how they can feed on certain foods, or like how it's because some of these invasive plants, they like release or they kind of crowd around the area too, so it's harder for a lot of like animals to hunt for food. So it severely impacts like entire ecosystem, honestly.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought up invasive species because that's a big thing in urban forestry. And in California, we see eucalyptus a lot all over the state. And eucalyptus is an invasive species. It's not native to California. It does great in California, but they absorb so much water. They drink up so much water that if you are trying to plant something else near it, you really can't, And there's a lot of trees, like one off the top is one that I just learned about. It's called the beefwood she oak. I mean, that just sounds invasive. And that tree, it creates a canopy that smothers, and it sends out roots that smother the understory so that other things can't grow. And you really can't grow that, along a street, and you really shouldn't plant that in a park. But we do have them in our parks, and there's not a lot growing around them. So, I mean, that happens all the time. But, something that we can do to kind of control species if we want to use those species, because they oftentimes absorb a lot of carbon. They do the heavy work of, cleaning our air. Those invasive species are really good for that. And so we can think about how to use trees strategically and where. So we've talked about the Adopt a Tree program, which, you know, has its pros and cons. And that gets trees to people's homes, and that kind of covers a lot of land to get the canopy, you know, big and covering acres. But if we want to tackle, you know, the air quality rates and the pollution rates, and start to think about, you know, making sure that we're intercepting someone with asthma when they're 7, that's building vegetative barriers. So when thinking about TCC, we thought about this, you know, we have 650 trees. It's not a lot of trees when you think about it. How do we maximize the benefit of the trees? We want to get trees to people's homes and we want to plant them in parks, but we want to really make a dent in the air quality of this city. And so we are trying really hard to focus the plantings along these major pollution sources. So that's I-5, that's the crosstown, 99, and then building corridors of clean air throughout the city, throughout that center space. So this is sort of our map that we created, and it comes with a lot of politics. Obviously, we need to get permissions from the city, from Caltrans. You know, who do we work with to plant trees at some of the housing authority complexes like Conway or Sierra Vista?
Okay, wait. You want to talk to, I'm a commissioner on that board at the housing authority.
Yeah, we could definitely talk after the fact,
Okay.
Pat. Yeah,
Okay.
for sure. Yeah, thank you. So we want to think strategically about getting as many trees in these strategic spots so that we're insulating the community from the pollution sources, the particulate matter. And if we can build, you know, a canopy that has an understory too, which means that we're planting, you know, big trees that reach 60, 70 feet tall. And then we're planting trees next to them that maybe reach like 30 feet tall. That's, you know, it's going to filter that air before it ever hits somebody's home. And this is just phase 1 for Little Manila, TCC, and the trees that we're planting around South Stockton is phase 1 of a long-term project to build these like insulation spaces to protect the communities. Any questions on that?
Yeah, you can come to my yard, figure I'd pull down this pine and put one up there.
Yeah, we don't cut down trees, but we do work with you and any resident if you are planning to cut down a tree to find a different tree if you are interested in having a tree in your yard after cutting one down.
Okay.
Let's see.
So I think, so as I live 3.5 blocks from I-5 on the east side of it. So, you know, I get all the crap that comes off of I-5. My toilet tank has a film of black dust on it every few days. You know, the window sills, the whole 9 yards. I love fresh air. I'm sorry. But it's killing me.
Mhm.
Right? I would love to see that whole I-5 on the east side of the freeway just laced with trees. And the problem is that we had trees, you know, that damn mistletoe, that fungi. You know, we got a ton of mistletoe. You go over to Miracle Mile, you go up to the north side, we got mistletoe in all these trees. It's literally choking them, sucking them. And that's the other thing we need to think about, is there's any that's resistant to mistletoe, what we can do for the tree against mistletoe.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are all considerations when selecting the species and thinking about how much diversity to pack into a single space. If it's only valley oaks, or if it's only one species of oak or pine, you know, those trees become more susceptible to diseases spreading. But if we can fill a space with a diversity of species, we can really try. We could do our best to prevent that. But mistletoe is a huge issue in California this year. I mean, it's a huge issue in Sacramento, and it comes from, you know, a lack of water. I mean, the trees are thirsty. they are heat stressed, and that's a more and more reality for canopies in California and climate change.
Makes them vulnerable.
Absolutely. And so we want to approach our tree plantings in a way that will create biodiversity. So these pictures were actually taken a few hours ago. We planted at the Hatch Workshop. We created a little vegetative barrier along a windshield processing warehouse. And we planted a bunch of varieties that are drought resistant and do well in sort of floodplains, because this was downhill from the train tracks. And so we planted some willows and we planted some acacia trees, and we also fit in some cherry trees. And we also planted succulents. So what's really cool about our program that I really want to highlight is that while we're planting trees and we have to plant these big trees for our grant, it doesn't mean that we can't really work at beautifying a space. And if we make the right partnerships with the right organizations and community comes out, which they did, we can really turn a space that could just be trees, which would be beautiful, and it would do so much for this industrial street that has no trees on it, into something that has food in it. Like the cherry trees will fruit, the nopales that we planted will fruit, and that's food. These succulents will do really well in the soil and provide, something different to look at. We planted maybe like a 200-pound agave plant that actually cut up my arm. But it's just, the approach to forestry doesn't just have to be about filling our city with these huge, heavy-hitting CO2 absorbers. It can be about turning really, garbage-filled space with glass and trash and, leftover pipes into a beautiful garden. And I think that's one of the most impactful things about urban forestry, and what this program could be and what it could be with all of your support and involvement is a space for community to come together. And that's what happened with our crew. I mean, this is day 3 of our cohort. And, you find a rhythm when you garden, when you plant something in the ground, you can lose yourself in that work. And, I just wanted to show you these pictures because I think that it shows that we're on the right track with what we're doing. You can kind of see in the picture on the left, the warehouse space, and what we found was a lot of these windshields. So there's just like tons of windshields in these pallets. A lot of them kind of tip over and fall into this space. So we had to clean up the glass and then, plant it out. But, there's like no tree cover here. The soil was dead, but we really focused on planting a diversity. We sheet mulched, which means that we laid compost down and then cardboard and then mulch. And that really builds up the organic matter in the soil and makes the trees have more nutrients to pull from, but also just kind of return some life to soil that hasn't been treated well for years.
Glendale and Phoenix, Arizona, they have citrus fruits along their sidewalks in blocks of dirt, like we would put trees, they put citrus fruits.
Yeah, I mean, that could be a whole presentation too about food forests and why they exist and why they don't exist in some cities, because a lot of cities don't want fruit trees. They don't want people to grow fruit, outside of their property. But it's important, and there's people here that want to do that. There's not the funding for it. All right, Bree. Well, that's sort of the end of the educational part of the presentation. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions before I pass it over to Bree? Okay, Bree.
All right, no worries. I know that was lots of really great information. So feel free to be a sponge. That's okay. Being sponges is fine. And if you have questions, we're here. Come talk to us. We want to hear from you all. But so I wanted to put a little plug in because this Saturday, we're going to be out at Williams Brotherhood Park planting trees and also leading a photo voice tour. So I know that there were some folks who weren't able to make it to the last event on Saturday. And so here is another opportunity for you all to come out and plant some trees with us and also participate in a photo voice tour. So it's happening this Saturday, April 2nd from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. at Williams Brotherhood Park. Please let us know that you're going. Register at this bit.ly/community plants, and I'm typing it right now in the chat for you all. Just making sure that I spell it right. Yeah, please let us know that you're coming. We want to try to get some food, and it's helpful to know how many folks are going to be out there with us planting. And it's also an opportunity for everybody here to meet our really wonderful community in training community foresters. Does anybody have any questions on that? Yes, I see a hand. Go ahead. I see two hands. Anik, go first, and then Anthony.
Okay, yeah. So my parents want to go as well to plant trees and stuff. So I was wondering if they could tag along with me as well.
Absolutely. Bring the whole family, bring the aunts, uncles, your mom, dad, grandma, bring anybody and everybody is welcome.
We need a lot of people, yeah. So please invite others or share it with clubs or you might be part of. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, got it. I just saw the chat and Jonathan said bring your cat and dog. Yes. Alrighty, thank you.
Okay, Anthony, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know. My question was, I don't know if I even had a question, but more so just the accessibility. Did you guys make the flyer accessible where I can share it? I know if, but like community like Sierra Vista, write everything lovely for them to have like a direct invite if you guys have not done so. Also, Dorothy L. Jones, which is part of Community Partnerships for Families of San Joaquin, director would have loved to get her staff involved in something like this.
I could, if you share your contact information with me in the chat, Anthony, I could give you a PDF and also an image of this flyer.
All right, cool.
Yeah, and I also say that I did this morning, did some canvassing around the area. So, so hopefully the people living around Williams Brotherhood Park also like comes out. So yeah, but please continue to spread the word and bring everybody.
Are we meeting like, it's not airport? Are we gonna meet on airport? Or are we gonna go inside the residential area and go up by, what's her name? The community center.
Yeah, great question, Pat. Thank you. Yeah, we're meeting at the community center.
Okay.
Okay, and then I see one more hand. Chow Ann.
Yeah, I was just wondering if there's ever going to be any tree planting events that happen around 2 p.m. because usually I have changes on Saturday and they always run into like the tree planting events, which I always want to go, but
There'll be a Friday tree planting event.
a Friday tree planting event?
The next one after this is April 22nd on a Friday.
Oh, okay. I'm definitely down for that. I'll definitely be able to make that. I'm happy. Thank you.
Yeah, and just a little bit more information on the April 22nd. It's gonna be a fun event, just FYI, because we're gonna be kicking off Earth Day. And I know that there's a lot of things happening that week, but we're gonna start it off on Friday, and then it's gonna be Saturday. Edible Schoolyard at Box Track is doing something, and then I know that on Sunday there is the uh, um, Earth Day event happening at Victory Park. So lots of very fun activities, and we're happy we're kicking it off at Van Buskirk Park. More information to come for sure, but we're hoping that that event. I mean, the tree planting has to happen in the morning because it's getting so hot now, and we have to be mindful of the volunteers and also everybody who comes out and help us. And so, but we'll do tree planting from 9 to 12, and we're thinking about staggering other events from 11 to 3. So, yeah, I mean, I just gave you all some exclusive information. So, but more to come, definitely. Anthony, I see that you still have your hand raised. Did you?
Well, let's wrap up. I know we're going a little over, so we also, like we said, have the Adopted Tree program. If there is a survey. I don't know if the link is here, but if you go to Greenlining the Hood on our Instagram page, I believe there's a link to the survey if you're interested in being part of the Adopted Tree program, and that comes with like scheduling with me and my crew, a site evaluation, which would be like looking at your front yard and doing the 811 call for you, which is the utilities assessment, and then figuring out which tree to plant at your site. And after the planting, at free maintenance checks for, I want to say, the first 3 years, and support. So everybody who is part of the Adopted Tree program will be invited to a series of workshops on how to maintain your tree.
Oh.
Oh, there we go. There's the QR code if you are interested in it.
Oh,
I'll
that's cute.
leave it up for a moment.
Thank you. Yes, scan that QR code. There's also, I just put in the chat a link. Again, it's bit.ly/myfreetree.
And this is a tiny URL for a feedback on the session. So please take some time to tell us how we did.
Okay.
And
URL.
Nico, thank you. Oh.
Nico, just stay there a few more minutes, and I think we could pass it on to via net.
Yeah.
And the QR and the code.
All right. So while people are filling that out, I think just want to say thank you to Nico and Brianna for today's presentation, and please let them know if you have any questions, like feel free to reach out to them, or I can also connect you with them if you're interested in participating in any of the upcoming events. So we hope to see you all on Saturday. But besides that, just a couple announcements for our youth advocates. Just wanted to let you know that I will be following up on our Basecamp channel with appointments schedules for one-on-one check-ins, which will be taking place next week. So just stay on the lookout for those updates on Basecamp. And I think that's everything I had, because the other announcement was the tree planting, which was already shared. So I guess opening it up, I don't know if anybody has any questions. Just wanted to thank the climate leaders for also joining us. I think William's still here, right? Sorry.
Yep, I'm still here. So
Okay.
yeah, the climate leaders, you'll get your own separate survey. In addition to I think the EJ post is specific for the youth advocates, right? So the climate leaders will get their own. I'll email that out tomorrow. You'll also receive a recording. So whoever is responsible, could you send the recording to Jonathan, and that way we can get it all sent out by tomorrow.
Yes, that'll be me. So I'll make sure to send that over.
Perfect.
Cool. Any last thoughts before we close out for the day? I just want to say thank you for listening. I know it's a lot of information, and we're still learning. Like I said, this is our first pilot program, and I'm sure that this presentation will look very different in a year, which I think is exciting because the program is growing and there's a lot of excitement in our communities for the tree program and being involved in the workforce. So stay tuned, and we'll see where this goes, in a year. But thank you again for listening. I appreciate it.
All right. I think, Anthony, do you have a question? I see your hands raised.
Oh, I like this map.
I'm gonna say, all right, no questions? Cool. So I think we'll just go ahead and close out for today, and just want to thank everyone for being here and hope to see you all on Saturday.
Thank you.